Hello, guys. I am back. And no, this is not your February wrap up. In fact, this is a mid-March wrap up. And that is simply because I do not have time to edit such a long video yet. My daughter has got a fever again because, Kita, daycare, whatever you want to call it. Okay, so let's start with the only thing that's got kind of a lower grade, and that is The Story Collector, which is a 2.5 star. And sometimes I'm debating whether I want to give it 2 stars, to be honest. I was really excited to read it because I love books that are set in different places, different timelines, and it's in Ireland for this one. And this young woman goes and she finds a diary hidden in a tree, which is a fairy tree. It's in kind of like a roundabout place. And when Sarah gets there and she finds Anna's diary, she's like, oh, this is great. And it's about 100 years apart. I did not find this one very good. And I say that because there was a lot of things that it needed that just simply did not have. In fact, here's my review of it. It's on Storygraph as well. This felt like a chore. Slow pace, more vibes and plot, and uninteresting characters. I wanted more fairy folk interactions. Instead, the writing was stilted and full of unanswered plot threads. And on an editing note, Sarah didn't feel American at all. She felt like an author insert given the clear Irish speech and syntax and phrasings. It didn't feel like two cultures colliding. Not quite 2 stars or 3. Not sure I'd rec this one to readers unless they enjoy plotting frustration. And I think that pretty much sums up my entire issue with this book. The author is Irish, and you can definitely tell that she's not American because when she's writing the American character, there are just a turn of phrase here and there that did not work. It was very subtle. Like when you go to the market, there's a very different way of phrasing it between the two cultures, and you would have someone from like Massachusetts talking like they were from, again, a small village in Ireland. It did not work for me. But so far in this month, that's the only low one. And in fact, out of the other 5 books I've read, they've all been 5 stars for many different reasons. So let's start with From the Darkness Cometh the Light by Lucy A. Delaney. And this was a very fascinating, very short book, audiobook that talks about Lucy Delaney as she went through slavery, through the Civil War, Reconstruction, finding her family. It was just a very interesting memoir because it was written post-Civil War, again, during Reconstruction, but you could definitely feel the way her family had been ruined and reunited and ruined again. And it was just, I think it's something that we should probably read in classes because it's very short. It's like an hour and a minute long. And I bought it. I bought it from Chirp Books because it was like 99 cents. And I like those kind of books. And then in the same way, I did another nonfiction. I read 10 Days in a Madhouse by Nellie Bly. I was really interested in this one because if you remember, in February, I just read The Mad Women's Ball, which is set in Paris in the late 1800s, so around the same time as Nellie Bly's investigative journalism and expose, set during her expose. And I just really loved the fact that it was honest. She was true. She let us know what she saw, how she felt, all these different things that are often shut away and hidden because during the time it was public and private sphere, and family stuff is private sphere, so we just don't talk about all those people. We don't talk about the women that are in the madhouse because they are not exactly as we want them to be. And the way her actions inform changes that are still needed today because there's a lot of women that are not so believed, but it's still a really well done look at how women are treated when those in charge have no regard for them. And I think that's really important right about now. Don't know if you've looked at the world around now, but it's kind of there. Okay, and then I read Wooing the Witch Queen by Stephanie Burgess, and this was a Queens of Villainy #1, and oh my god. Okay, so let me explain. Stephanie Burgess is one of those authors that is I am absolutely 100% going to read. Whatever she puts out, it does not matter. She's in there like India Holton, Jennifer Estep, Heather Fawcett. Like, there's just certain authors that I know that, irregardless in this like fantasy type sphere, that I'm going to grab them. And I love her. She's, there's a lot of pep and vinegar in her characters, and I love that. So here's how I wrote it in my review. I said, a wonderful, cozy romance, perfect for fans of The Spell Shop, another author that I'm learning I love. There's a lot of character growth and reflection without bringing down the tone. Not quite frothy, but conversational world building, easy to follow, great lead ups for the trilogy without feeling forced. So I also said, need a book that makes you smile on a dreary day. Pick up one featuring a villainous witch queen who dares to bark back in a librarian with a cawing conundrum. And this is kind of like the final part. Here's a quick recipe. Stir in some of Jennifer Eastep's Evie badassery, India Holton charm, Tessa Dare's circle of friends and slow burn, Burgess's fountain pen love, and Kingfisher's found family. And I think that's pretty much, if you enjoy those kind of books, if you enjoy truly cozy fantasy, then you'll love this. I know that some people do not. Like, I know Jess Owens is not really into it. As she mentioned recently, that's why I'm mentioning it. But for those of us that enjoy this, it's the perfect thing for you to listen to. I listen to it, but you can read it on a day when you need to smile and laugh. And then we are down to the last two books. And by the way, I'm going to have another Wooing the Witch Queen in another video where I talk about some of this other stuff, but I wanted to point out that that was a 5-star read, and I'm guaranteed to like whatever Stephanie Burgess puts out. Okay, so the last two are actually both by Heather Fawcett. First, there's Emily Wilde's Compendium of Lost Tales, which is the final Emily Wilde book, and that makes me so sad that I'm going to cry. Because if you don't know, Emily Wilde was one of those books that really made me love cozy fantasy and made me love this like fairy folk kind of genre. Like, I'm not a spicy reader. I'm not a spicy girl, right? It's not what I do. You know, I mentioned on Kaylee's video on Read, Rate, and Review recently that when I was reading and reviewing romance, I just kind of like skipped over the spice scenes because oftentimes they were shorthand for something about building a false sense of something. And I think that one reason I love Heather Fawcett is you build it up. It's not so spicy, but you build up that relationship that over the course of those 3 books, the romantic relationship is built and it creates this great, wonderful, needed reality. And this is how I reviewed it on Storygraph. Sometimes a reader needs an adventure, and Emily Wilde always delivers. A fitting book 3 that looks into the relationship between Emily and Wendell as well as those around him. Lots of new fairies and lore that doesn't bog down the main arc, only advancing. Good, solid read. Really don't want the series to end. And I'm mentioning that because, like with Burgess, if you can build a world of fairies and not bog it down but make it stand out, I love that. Like back in, I don't know, 20 years ago, somewhere around there, I was reading books like YA that had Shakespeare. It was like Shakespeare characters that were set in a world of plays and stuff, and you know the characters would walk in and out of it. And I really loved that one as well because it made it more accessible. Now, I was in my 20s at the time, and I have severe issues with Shakespeare a lot of the time, but I enjoyed the use of Puck and stuff like that, and I think that's why I like these characters because they really stand out. And Emily Wilde discusses things that are adult, and I don't mean adult, but I mean like adult, like conversations we have as a couple, conversations my husband and I could have, conversations that you and your partner could have, whether it be not necessarily what we're going to have for dinner that day, but like serious ones about how our worlds are going to fit together. Because as an immigrant, it's something that's important. And in some ways, Emily Wilde is an immigrant as well because of her whole relationship with a fairy prince, right? So it really works out. Now, the last one I'm going to talk about is The Grace of Wild Things, which I finished last night. And oh my God, that was such a good book. Guys, I had no idea it was out there. I was looking up Heather Fawcett. I was like, hey, I think my library would like this because it seems like it would really fit into the theme of, you know, what they stock, because they really enjoy to stock the cozy fantasies. And so I grabbed it, and oh my God, it's a retelling of Anne of Green Gables. But it's in such a way that you don't expect it, because it's set in a fairy tale world meets like Avonlea. So it's this really interesting way. It's not in Avonlea though, but it's set in that style. And you get these, you can see like the Marilla, the Diana, the Gilbert. You can see all of these things in the Anne Shirley, especially the Anne Shirley, but it's in a new way and it's in a new world, and it's not even it's not a retelling, it's a reimagining. It's a completely flipped look at this of Anna of Green Gables, and it's like what happens when an orphan kind of tries to go find her own future because she's a witch. It was so good. Like my review says, enchanting, hopeful, tender. Grace is a worthy successor to Anne Shirley in terms of vivaciousness, openness, and kindness. Just as chatty in the best ways, and the use of poetry is quite clever. I love Anne of Green Gables, and have since childhood. I can see the direct influence, but it's not a retelling. Truly is a unique view of who Anne could be in a different scenario, where fairy tales, witches, and villains are real as she searches for a home. Use of various characters from the original are obvious, but maintains the core relationship of it all. Highly recommend for middle grade readers. As a young girl, I would have adored this, and I think so. I think especially like if you're teaching or something like that, I think this would be a really fun comparative lit between the two. The first one is very of the time. It's set in the late 1800s, early 1900s, that era of societal demands, and this one is also set in that same time period, but it's set in a different context. And so I think if you really want something that's fun and uplifting, but that doesn't mean that it's all fun and games, because there's some very dark, serious tones in it. But like the other cozy fantasies that I've been mentioning in the past, 5 minutes, it's very well done. And that's what I've read. I've read 6 books this month, which is not bad by the 15th, 16th of this month. Normally I would have read maybe 1 or 2, but more. But my daughter has been out of Kita for a couple of weeks, because a couple of days a week, because of either sickness like this week, or we've had bus strikes, which I'm all for the strikes. Please don't get me wrong, but it means that she can't go to school that day because I don't have a car. I can't drive here. I can't drive in Germany. It means we have to take public transit. When transit goes on strike, we pretty much go on strike as well. I am looking forward to the rest of this month. Right now, I am finishing up The Girl Who Drank the Moon by Kelly Barnhill, who you guys know wrote When Women Were Dragons, and I love that book. I'm also looking forward to finishing Medea by Rosie Hewlett. Rosie Hewlett is one of those authors I know I'm going to like whatever she writes. She's just got this really interesting view of the world, writing a feminist retelling of some of these books. I've been looking forward to it for, since last year. I just haven't had time to read it because it's such a thick book, but I eventually broke down and bought the audiobook, and I also have the printed copy, so I can't wait to talk about that in another video later in the month. But I'm excited for that, and I'm also reading Unromanced by Erin Connor, so that's at least 3 books. Plus, I need to finish The Rebel Nun, which I started earlier in the month, but I paused it because of library holds, and I wanted to get through some of these books to get them off of my physical TBR shelf, such as Medea. It's not leaving, but I wanted to get through my bookshelf a little bit. So I will come back later in the month and give you the highs and the lows, but obviously you can see I've had a ton of highs. 5 out of 6 books were 5 stars. Not bad. Not bad at all. All right, guys. I will talk to you later.